Well, I'm doing well, hanging in there like everybody else. It's certainly unusual times, and lots of LSU people, LSU fans are all kind of playing the waiting game in this holding pattern until we get some direction on what might happen. But, LSU continues to do what they can do, like all schools are doing.
With regard to the other sports, before we talk about football, baseball's had 6 players enter transfer portals, but none of them really anybody that would be considered important to their program at all. Hal Hughes would be the biggest name, but good field no hit in that regard, and LSU certainly can get better. Bottom line, these guys are leaving because they either weren't going to play at LSU or they were looking for somewhere else to play.
I agree with that, and you never know how that came to be. Did Coach Maneri suggest, hey, you might want to look around? Sometimes the kids can see the writing on the wall. They don't always want to believe that. But like you said, I don't think there, other than the glove of Hal Hughes, there's not anything that I think can be replaced by the coaching staff. And Coach Maneri knows about guys that might be coming in. And with the MLB draft being shrunk to 5 rounds, that's going to make some things a little bit different in the recruiting aspect of that. LSU only had 2 seniors in the roster last year, and they'll both return next year, but won't count against the roster limit of 35 as part of what the NCAA allowed after the pandemic stopped play earlier in the spring. So I know Coach Maneri and his staff, they're trying to work the roster the best they can. They may even be in the transfer portal looking for somebody that might want to come to Baton Rouge. So there's a lot on the table there, but Coach Maneri's staying on top of it. I spoke to him a little over a week ago, not necessarily in the particulars of the baseball program, but he just told me in general he was still doing what he could do with his coaching staff and, watching what guys might go where. He was talking about the MLB draft, how long might it be and what effect will that have, because certainly LSU season stopped after 17 games. They were 12-5 when it ended, and who knows what would have happened. We'll never know, so they must prepare for the 2021 season.
LSU basketball, still some conjecture surrounding Will Wade. Nothing has happened there with regard to the NCAA, and it doesn't seem to have fazed him at all. He's putting together a terrific, if not spectacular, recruiting class, isn't he?
He really is. NCAA kind of seems to be paying more attention to Kansas than anything else. Right. But Will Wade's name has come up a time or two, and he's still there. Many other names that came out and all that other stuff are still doing what they're doing, and it's not stopped Will Wade from going out there and trying to get some players and make his basketball team better. Notably, having Shaquille O'Neal's son come in. He's not the player Shaquille O'Neal was, and I think everybody knows that. But I just think that'll bring some eyes to the program. And Will Wade has continued to work very hard. He's got an ability to get players to town. It looks like he has an ability to develop players as well, which is the 2 steps in recruiting that I always like to refer to is get them on campus and then you must develop them. So Will Wade has not stopped working either, even though, we're all doing things differently in our daily routines.
Tommy Krysan with us talking about LSU, and it's 260-1061 if you'd like to join us. Of course, where LSU football is concerned, when you lose that much talent, you can't possibly be as good as you were, but I don't think anybody could expect LSU to be that good again, considering how great this football team was a year ago. And yet, this is still unquestionably a top 10 football team on paper, if not better, isn't it?
I agree. And, when you look at all the guys, 14 of them got drafted, another handful signed a free agent contract. You look through that list, Patrick Queen, his name wasn't resonating all over the place in September. And some of these other guys got out on the field and showed the talent that they had. Coaches put them in a good spot to be successful. And I think LSU got more of those kind of guys, more of those Patrick Queens and whatnot that can emerge by the development of the coaches and the coaching that goes into that. And I think a direct tie to that, Ken, is this analyst support staff, because that frees up the coaches to do more development, because they're doing a lot of things that coaches used to have to do. And a couple of years ago, and I commented on it at the time, Ed Orgeron realized he had to kick up the analyst staff. Went to the president, that got the money, went to the AD, and they made it happen. And just recently brought Eddie Kinnison and Calvin Shepard in, two guys that played in the NFL, as members of the support staff. And I don't think he gets enough credit on A, what they do, and B, what they free up the on-the-field coaches to be able to do. That led to development like Patrick Queen and many others on this football team, and the hard work. I mean, it all came together. Storybook season. I don't know if you'll ever see that by any team again. And considering who they did it to, beating the 7 top 10 teams and annihilating people. I mean, it was men with boys. And there was no other way to say that in that case. As you said, Ken, there's a lot of shoes to fill. A lot of talent won't wear a purple and gold uniform next year. But I think they've got depth. Certainly there'll be some question marks. You go back to last August, probably the biggest question mark about LSU football was the offensive line. How would that work? Would it protect Joe Burrow? Could they run the football? They ended up being named best offensive line unit in the country. And that's a credit to Coach James Craig and the rest of his staff and those players for working very hard. So I think LSU's loaded. They've continued to recruit. They've 100% bought into Ed Orgeron and his staff. And, I'm not saying they're going to go 15-0 and have a Heisman Trophy winner, but I think they have a chance to compete in the SEC West and win that division and end up in Atlanta and then maybe in the playoff. Now, in all likelihood, might not happen, but you never know. Nobody thought they'd do what they did last year in the big picture.
Looking at the offensive side of the ball, I think LSU still has elite skill position talent. I think their 3 running backs are all good, who figure to get better and all have different skills. Their wide receiver position, which was off the charts last year, should be outstanding again this year. Certainly. They've recruited well at tight end, clearly. And the offensive line, despite graduating players, has 2 good ones back and 2 others that have a lot of ability there. You got to fill the center spot more than anything. So that really kind of gets you to quarterback and Miles Brennan. And just what is he going to be? He's been in the program for 3 years. He's definitely going to be the guy. He finally got bigger. Everybody knows he's got some leadership qualities. That's been talked about since he's been there. And everybody knows he's got a good arm. And we're told over and over again he's got a better arm than Joe Burrow had. So do you see this offense all being about Miles Brennan, or do you see this offense being able to perform well if he's just average?
No, I think he's got to be better than average if they want to compete for the SEC West. And I agree with what you said. We've been told this, we've been told that. Coach Orgeron appears to totally believe in Miles Brennan, and he's got to be the guy because T.J. Finley and Max Johnson, I mean, there's nothing else there. So he's got to be the guy. Now, I think if you're an LSU fan, you have to take note of the fact that he was around Joe Burrow for a year plus, year and a half, two seasons plus some other time. He was around Joe Brady. Steve Ensminger doesn't get enough credit for his role in this whole thing. So if the mental end of it is there and he can match that with the physical end and the production, it could be a little bit different. I don't know that he'll tuck the ball and go, or he'll be as mobile in the backfield or extend the play like Burrow did, but maybe he will. I think he's, confidence is the most dangerous thing in sports. And I think he's confident of the fact that he's the leader of this football team. Now he's got to get it to where when he sticks his head in the huddle, they're listening. If he speaks up in the locker room, they're listening, which Joe Burrow clearly had that quality going for him. He had that confident thread in his body, no question about it. Maybe some of that rubbed off to Miles Brennan. But if Miles Brennan can just, not necessarily have keys to the car like they gave to Joe Burrow, and I don't like the term manage the game, but if he can just not mess the game up, keep it between the lines, protect the football, don't turn it over, and execute the plays and grow as the season goes along. They don't have an SEC game until down the road a little bit, late September, 4th game, if everything unfolds as scheduled, before they play SEC play against Ole Miss. Prepare to have Ole Miss in Baton Rouge in the month of September, but that'll be the case if everything unfolds right. So I think a lot of this is going to be Brennan. It's going to get talked about a lot. I mean, he's got to go in and take the place of a Heisman Trophy winning, record-setting, #1 pick in the NFL draft guy. So I think he has to go be Miles Brennan. Go do what you do best and be the best you can be. He's not going to be Joe Burrow. Tiger fans need to understand that. He's got to go be Miles Brennan and be the very best he can be and be a part of this offense that hopefully can go up and down the field and score a bunch of points.
Defensively, of course, up front, you've got the imposing presence of Tyler Shelvin, Glenn Logan. You got Farrell's. You got Siaki Ika as well, Evans up front. And then you get to linebacker, and you're counting on Baskerville, Damone Clark, Andre Anthony. Ray Thornton's a swing guy who can play two different spots. And then in the secondary, I think they're really good, despite the fact that they graduate two guys that were high draft picks, and Delpit and Fulton. They've still got really good players back there. We all know about Stingley and how good he is, but Flott played well. Jacoby Stevens is exceptional. Gary Vincent proved he could play. You've got Hampton. I think there's the strength of the defense, to me, looks like the secondary.
I agree with that, and I like the fact of Bo Pelini coming back to town. I've always viewed it when you get in these Power 5 conferences and you get a new coordinator on any team, a little bit of complacency goes out the door because you kind of got to prove yourself to that new coach. The coach has got to prove himself to those new players, and I think it puts a little giddy up in everybody's step in the few spring practices that they had, and then whenever they would roll into fall camp. And Bo Pelini is much more of an aggressive defensive coach than Dave Aranda was. And that's got to be the case in the SEC because you have to affect the quarterback. You have to affect the quarterback to have success in the Southeastern Conference. And I believe Bo Pelini's defense and the talent that LSU has will do just that. I mean, he will. I mean, Stingley will come on the blitz from the corner. I mean, he will mix it up, attack the quarterback, and affect that offense. And I think that's going to be a plus. I'm not real worried about the defense at this point. I wasn't last year, and they had guys emerge. I think they'll have guys emerge this year to go along with Stevens and Stingley and those guys up front, on the defensive line. I think they're going to be just fine. And Bo Pelini, I don't think he gets enough credit, his defensive coaching prowess that he has, because when he was at Nebraska, they ended up running him off, but defensively they were at the top of the conference every year. Now the Big Ten's not the SEC, but Bo Pelini knows that.
Right, and Todd Harris, if he's healthy, certainly is a factor too. And then of course the kicking game is exceptional. Cade York slumped a bit late, but he should be solid. Zach Von Rosenberg, very good, and Avery Atkins, very good. Stingley to return kick, so that's an aspect of the game they should be good in. Bottom line is this. They've got the best wide receiver in the country in Jamar Chase. They've got the best cornerback in the country, in my estimation, in Derek Stingley. So on each side of the ball, they have the best player in the country at one specific position. That's a great place to start, isn't it?
I agree 100%. And those guys are going to get talked about. They're going to get the attention. But, you don't win a national championship the way they did without having depth. Yeah, we know about all the guys that went to the NFL and whatnot. But they had to work hard every day against guys who are now going to get on the field on a Saturday night. And I think that's going to prove out to be that these guys are going to get developed. And by the time we get to November, again, if we're playing ball like everyone hopes we are, there may even be some other name you and I haven't even mentioned tonight that may end up being all conference. That's the kind of talent that Ed Orgeron and the staff had recruited into Baton Rouge. And, the proof's in the pudding. We'll see what happens. I think if we play college football, and I think we're going to play some form of college football. I don't think it's going to look like anything like what last year looked or what people might call normal. But I think there's going to be some kind of college football this fall. I'm not smart enough to spell out the details for you, but there's going to be some college football played, in my opinion. It's just not going to look anything like the norm.
Yep, I'm with you. Final thought, schedule opens with UT San Antonio, then Texas comes to Baton Rouge, Rice, and then the SEC opener at home against Ole Miss, and then Nichols Texas game looms large again. This time it's in Baton Rouge. If they beat Texas, they're going to be 5-0 going to Gainesville, aren't they?
I would agree with that. Because you got Ole Miss and Nichols, and then it's 7 straight SEC games. That gauntlet that'll be there. South Carolina jumps in from the East, but no, if they can beat Texas, you're right, Ken. Because Ole Miss is not there yet. Lane Kiffin might get them there, but they're not there yet. And then they'll beat Nichols, and then it'll be a tough one to go down to Gainesville because Florida is expected to be much improved, and I like Dan Mullen as a coach, and we'll see, and we'll worry about that when it gets down to October the 10th, and then it'll be tough. It'll be a gauntlet through October and November of SEC play.
Yep. Again, Alabama, Florida, Georgia, Auburn, all very good. LSU should be right in there with all of them. And again, LSU will play Alabama off of an off week this year once again, so 2 weeks to prepare for that game at Tiger Stadium on November the 7th. And you can follow him on Twitter at Tommy Krysan, and, of course, read work at CrescentCitySports.com as well. Tommy, a pleasure. Thanks for joining us, and we'll talk again soon.
I appreciate you having me, Ken. You guys have a wonderful rest of the evening and a nice weekend.